Welcome to Five on the Floor, brought to you by 5 Reasons Sports Network. I'm Jonathan, aka 3.
All right, welcome everybody to the 5 Reasons Sports Network Heat Season Preview Show. My name is David Fernandez. I'm joined today by Michael and Jonathan from the network. We're brought to you today by Biscayne Bay Brew. They have some of the best beers that you can have from down here. You know, they've got a Marlins Lager. They've got their Tropical Bay IPA. They support the 5 Reasons Sports Network. So we have to support them. Make sure that you look out for any of the Biscayne Bay brews out there in Publix, Milam's, Mendes Fuel, places like that. So today, again, I've got Michael and Jonathan with me here this evening. We're going to talk a little bit about what we think the Miami Heat season is going to look like. And, I mean, we've got exciting times on tap. There were some games that are going already today. We're watching the Brooklyn Nets really take it to the Warriors here early on. But the Heat don't get started until tomorrow. So we've got plenty of stuff up in the air, plenty of expectations to touch on, plenty of moves that we can talk about. But it's an exciting time, right? I mean, we just came off a finals appearance for the Heat, and we've got the next season right on tap. How you guys doing? Can't hear you, man.
Am I better now? Okay,
yeah. There you are.
Awesome. So yeah, I feel like we're in a really good position because think about it. Like you said, we just came off a finals appearance. On top of that, we have a plethora of young guys. We don't talk about him much. We still got the guy who came in second place for Rookie of the Year last year, Kendrick Nunn. He's coming in. He said he's feeling a little more confident, and his confidence is really key. We got Tyler Hero. Duncan Robinson, I still consider young because he's young NBA. You know what I mean? He hasn't had that many years pro yet. We got KZ Okpala. We got Precious. We got Max Strus. We have so many young talent. And on top of that, we have a current today leader in Jimmy Butler. And then we have somebody that we know is going to develop into our tomorrow leader and already is kind of one in Bam Adebayo. So we have such a good group, and we're in such a good spot where we can either keep these young guys, develop them, and make a run to the finals, or trade for a player with some of these young guys and run to the finals. So I feel like we're in a great position moving forward. Steven, how you doing? Michael, how you doing?
Yeah,
and Michael, how you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, listen, this team, you pointed out the guys, right? This team is a lot of young guys. There's a lot to be excited about. I think we all want to see PJ Tucker in a Heat jersey. Honestly, I'd say send all those guys that we were talking about for the Harden trade, but send all those guys just for PJ Tucker.
That's for PJ.
No, but honestly, I think this team looks good. We talked about it before. I think this team can make it to the finals the way they're constructed right now. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be an easy road, and there are trades you can make to make that lineup, better and an easier road to the finals. But I think they can make it right now, even with this Nets game that's going on right now. The Nets look fantastic, which is kind of the big worry that he had going into the season. That was the unknown team.
Sure.
But I'm also going to put a great assault with it, which is they're playing the Warriors, who aren't that great, aren't at full strength.
Yeah.
I can't even name too many of the guys on their rosters. So, I'd say let's slow down a little bit on the net stuff. I still think they're going to be very good, probably second or third seed in the East, but let's slow down a little bit on the Nets and worry about the Heat and what we've got.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's start right there. I mean, there's so much variability here in the Eastern Conference. I mean, most of us probably expect the Bucks to be up there at the top, but then 2 to 6 really between the Heat, the Celtics, the Nets, even the Philadelphia 76ers. I mean, it's kind of a jumble in that spot. And, when you're looking at a team that's coming off of a finals run the way that Miami was, right? You don't typically see that team, built around the young talent in the way that this one was. Normally, right. It's veteran-laden teams and things like that make those deep runs, which was, I guess, part of the surprise for the Heat making it all the way to the finals and then really pushing the Lakers more than any other team had pushed them throughout the course of the postseason. Yeah. But the Heat made some interesting choices in the offseason. that some people weren't crazy about, right? There were some key contributors to last year's Heat squad that are no longer with this year's squad, namely Jay Crowder and Derek Jones Jr. The Heat also extended Bam. He got his max extension, and they re-signed Goran Dragic, right? They also brought back Myers Leonard, and some of those moves people were kind of questioning. So considering everything that the Heat did this offseason, right? In addition, bringing in Avery Bradley, Mo Harkless, drafting Precious Achiuwa, of the additions that they made, right? So Bradley, Harkless, Achiuwa, which one do you guys think might be the most important for the team this year among those three guys?
I'll take this one first. Among just those three guys, honestly, I'd kind of throw in KZ as an acquisition just because he wasn't really acquired. We already had him, but he didn't really play for us, right? So I'd kind of throw it in there. But of those three guys, I'm going to put Precious on the line here just because I expect a lot from him, right? We've come to expect a lot from – we'd never draft first, like in the first round. We don't ever do it. We usually traded those picks away. It had been a while. The last 2 first-round picks we've had hit, and they hit really well, right? So I'm expecting that trend to continue. I want to see the most out of Precious, and especially with him playing on the second unit, we're really going to need him to play a really strong interior presence because he's probably going to take a lot of minutes when Bam's not on the floor. Rebounding and interior defense is something I'm really worried about with this team. So I'm looking for Precious to kind of fill in and grow as the season goes along and really show, hey, I'm the answer in there. Don't worry about it. So
absolutely. Jonathan, which one are you most looking forward to?
Well, Precious was mine too. I agree because same things he said, the interior defense, and we saw in that second preseason game, he can pull rebounds. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yep,
and on top of that, he kind of has the anti-Justice Winslow touch where he's really good at the rim for a big guy, even if he's diving in. So with coming off the bench, him and Goran or him and Hero, depending on who they start, can be a really, really good pick and roll threat where he's just diving to the rim and making plays happen. But I think outside of Precious, I'm going to put the most important guy out of those three would be Avery Bradley, because I think we've seen that a lot of times the Heat have trouble containing those guards. Like we had no answer for a Russell Westbrook or for a Trae Young. Those guys would just go off on us. And now we have somebody who at least can give them a hard time. And that's going to be somebody who's going to make them, switch their hands 5 times before they cross half court and make sure that they always have pressure on them. So I think if Avery Bradley is able to live up to his career defining, basically what he is just a defender and just maybe hit some threes. He's good at those threes. He's good at those mid-rangers too. He's kind of a sleeper on some of those shots. I think he could probably have 5 or 6 games where he hits 5 or 6 threes and then hits a couple of jumpers and he scores over 20. So I think Avery Bradley can really be that piece where we would just plug him in perfectly where we had a hole and he'll fit really good with this team.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said there. I mean, both of you, you're right on with Precious. I'm really excited to see what he can bring. Yeah. But as a rookie, I mean, you don't want to put too much on his plate. And the Heat, they still have Kelly and Myers that are bigs. Not to say that either of those guys are better than Precious, but maybe the pressure might not be there. But I think, Jonathan, what you were saying about Avery Bradley, I'm really interested to see how Eric Spoelstra incorporates Bradley into this group, right? We're assuming that Bradley's going to come off the bench, and he seems to address a major issue of need, as you were saying. That point of attack defense was something that the Heat were worried about throughout the season last season, right? And it was something that the Heat were worried about well into the playoffs, and Bradley provides a perimeter defender that will take some of the pressure off Jimmy Butler, for example.
I mean, if you were to look at our list of guards, and I know that technically Jimmy is guard, small forward, he's kind of in between, but I put in my head, we always play him at the 3, right? Yeah. So I put him in that different group. If you look at our list of guards, Avery Bradley's the only one that can really defend.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I mean, Goran, unfortunately, has never been known for defense. Tyler, unless he has some sort of massive improvement. Duncan is trying, but
those referees hate
Kendrick.
Duncan. No matter what Duncan does, those referees will call the foul on him.
Yeah. So, I mean, our guards needed somebody. So it's nice to have Bradley in there. So at least when a point guard is going off, we're like, hey, you guys sit down. We're just going to throw Avery at him, you know?
Absolutely. And he provides some versatility. I mean, he's actually switchable 1 through 3 for sure. And he can probably defend some stretch 4s on top of that. I mean, the other night when they were playing against the Raptors, you know, he matched up against Siakam from time to time. And, you know, he's a pesky defender. He's somebody that's going to play with energy. So I'm really interested to see how Avery Bradley kind of works into this mix. Now, to get back to the additions and I guess the subtractions, right? One of the big worries that many Heat fans had was letting Jay Crowder go, because Jay Crowder played such a pivotal role in the bubble. I mean, especially early on in the playoff run, he was on fire from deep, and he was one of the primary defenders against Giannis Antetokounmpo. But we don't have him anymore. They let him walk. I mean, I don't disagree with this decision. I mean, he ended up getting 3 years from the Phoenix Suns. It was hard to imagine the Heat were going to give Jay Crowder a 3-year deal. But when you look at who they brought in, and then I'm going to sort of pull in who you had mentioned, Michael, in KZ. When you look at who's on the roster now, who do you guys think is maybe best suited to play that Jay Crowder role?
I'll let Jonathan take this one first.
I think right now, you're going to have to say Mo Harkless just because of his track record. KZ has a track record of 1 game, and it's been a really good game. You know what I mean? And don't get me wrong, he could progress throughout the season to taking that role where he is the primary defender on you know, the lengthy 4, the lengthy wing on the other team. But I think for right now, Mo Harkless is that guy we're going to stick in that Jay Crowder role where we're going to be like, hey, shoot a little more threes than you're probably used to before. And you know, be a hard body in the 4 and really just make yourself known out there. Because Jay Crowder, what did he do? He wasn't overly great defensively. He was just really, really tough. And he was really, really just making himself felt. So if Mo Harkless can do kind of the similar thing and just pick up some of that Heat culture that other teams really haven't instilled in him and really just maximize his potential. He's only 27. He's still a pretty young guy. And so if he can really just get that shooting touch and improve his defense a little bit, he's the guy that I'm looking forward to being slated in that Jay Crowder role coming into this season.
Absolutely. Michael, what do you think?
So we'll get into this more when we talk about, you know, our projected starting lineup or what we think should start and everything. The only reason why I'm not going to agree with Mo Harkless in that position is because Mo Harkless is probably either going to foul out within the first 2 minutes, you know, or he's just going to get bullied. He looks really thin, right? He looks really kind of small for his size. So I really think that KZ, even just now, can be in there and be the best option we have as that Jay Crowder replacement. I don't think he'll be on Jay Crowder's level. Jay was buff, man. Like, he was a thick dude, and he pushed and he played hard. I haven't seen that yet from KZ. Granted, we haven't seen much from him, but I don't see him causing the same problems for LeBron and Giannis as Jay did. But I think KZ still gives us our best shot, and hopefully he can get to that point one day where he's a better version of Jay Crowder. But even now, I say he gives us our best shot to kind of replace him.
Yeah, listen, I'm kind of with you. I want to see more of what we have in KZ. Not so much because, I mean, obviously he had an amazing game the other night against the Raptors. And yes, it was preseason, but still he scored 24 points. I mean, he hit 6 of 10 from 3. You know, he was active defensively. He was moving along the baseline. You know, he can handle the ball a little bit. So, you know, some of the talk on KZ is that, you know, best case scenario, he's 3-and-D, but I think he actually has a little bit more to his game than merely just a 3-and-D. And when you think about Jay Crowder, that's basically his role, right? The 3-and-D role.
Yep.
I would like to see
when the 3 was there.
Right, when the 3 was there.
It was there for a lot of it, and then when we really needed it, it vanished. It was like the Avatar.
That was the worst part of it, right?
That was a good one.
So with I'm kind of leaning towards KZ just for selfish reasons, right? I want to see this prospect that supposedly the Miami Heat had on their board right behind Tyler Hero. They've said, I know that the guys on the 5 on the Floor pod, and Greg has said it, and I think Ethan said it as well, that, you know, the Heat would have considered taking KZ Okpala in the first round had Tyler Hero been drafted, you know? So when you have that level of confidence in a player, We never really got to see it last year, and we caught a tantalizing glimpse of it the other night against the Raptors. And he has the body type for it, right? And I guess that's the fear with Mo Harkless beyond him being a foul machine. I mean, Harkless has started a little bit more than half of his games in the NBA, but if he can hit that three consistently, I think that the combination of the two will ultimately be better than Jay Crowder. How do you guys feel about losing Derrick Jones Jr.?
I'm not too mad about it too much because we always use him as kind of a perimeter guard, and we got Avery Bradley for that, and Avery Bradley's a better 3-point shooter than that, and then you have KZ and Precious, who are really going to be those main rim threats. You've seen Precious get up high, like super high for a guy that size, and I don't think we're going to miss him too much. I think Jay Crowder is a little bit more one that's a little harder to lose right off the. We might feel the impact of losing him right away because he was just so perfect next to Bam. He can guard the guy next to Bam. Hey, you want him to switch onto a center? He'll switch onto a center. He'll bang with a center too. So he was really good with that, and then he was just phenomenal from three. And you can't really overstate that because just that touch was so great, and the shots were there for him because that's what our offense created. So I think whoever is put in that spot, if they're able to do a similar things, the offense is going to create opportunities for these guys, whether it's Mo Harkless or KZ Okpala. But I think it's not too bad. We're going to lose some fun dunks. You know what I mean? It's always fun having the dunk champ on your team. I love Derrick Jones Jr. He's a super fun guy, but I don't think we're going to miss him too much as far as just a team level.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's too much to miss there with Derrick Jones Jr. Like outside of him as a person, like he was just you could tell he worked hard and you wanted him to succeed. He just never really got that buffer physique that we were all kind of hoping for. I will say though, if we want a really good defensive, big body, presence inside, I think PJ Tucker might be on the market. I'm going to keep throwing it out there, guys. Could really help. Could really help.
We might have to head over to a trade machine and see what works over there.
Listen, I'll send Jimmy for PJ. Why not?
Let's do it.
Somebody clips that, you're gonna be roasted.
Oh, I'm banned for sure.
100%. So I mean, it's gonna be bittersweet to see airplane mode out there in the Pacific Northwest, but as you guys said, there's some intriguing young talent on this team. It could be a lot of fun to see Derrick Jones Jr. go up against Precious in a dunk contest. Oh, here he is. Here we
go.
PJ Tucker fan club number 2.
So listen, bro. Even though this Wi-Fi in this hotel sucks, if I heard Mike say PJ Tucker's name one more time,
it was in the comments. Just making Jason happy. Jason Lim's in the comments. I wanted to call him out.
Not to hell with that, bro. You guys are doing great. I just jumped on here for a little second because I wanted to be a part of it. But
how you feeling about the season, bro?
Get off here. Yeah, I mean, I'm feeling good, man. You know what I mean? James Harden stuff aside, I'm still relatively confident in the team. I think that the Eastern Conference Finals should be our bar. Just overarching, I'm expecting big things from Tyler. I'm expecting big things from Bam. You guys were having a conversation about who should slot in at that 4th spot, and I think I agreed with Jonathan when he was saying that Mo Harkless might be the most serviceable person to plug in right now. But I think ultimately we have to look at what Precious can do in that position because a lot of us didn't think that he would be ready for the season. But, seeing his progression through those 2 games in the preseason, they made me just all the more confident that you might as well throw him out there, let him get his feet wet because he can provide some of the things that we need in terms of interior defense and rebounding. So, I mean, I'm just going to join for a little while, but I'll be out of here momentarily.
No, I think that's something we haven't even mentioned was that the option. Sorry about that, David, about Precious going into that 4th spot because, like we said, he has a good touch. He's really good as far as finishing around the rim and creating his own shot in a way where he's fast. He's really agile for a big person. Mm-hmm. And that's something that, like we talked about the Bam clone, that's something that Bam does really well too, is that first step is just right off the rip. And once he gets that first step, he's good to go. And Precious, it's not a proven track record of that 3-point shot, but if you can develop that, he has a good touch. That's something that could really flourish. And we've seen guys like Brandon Clark come out of pick 20 and just be that guy that steps up and be really good. So I think Precious does have the opportunity to really be at that 4th spot that if he grows really quickly this season.
It'll be interesting to see if Spoelstra does that. I mean, think back to the beginning of the season last season, and we were thinking about who might start and who's coming off the bench. What does the rotation look like? Kendrick Nunn came out of absolutely nowhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
He had that monster preseason game where he dropped 40, and then
against the Rockets.
Yeah, against the
right.
Rockets, right. And then he was a surprise addition to the starting lineup, and he was a great player for us for really, I mean, most of the season, well through the first half. Rookie of the month, I think it was the first 3 months of the year. So, if you think about the preseason, the way it unfolded, you wonder, is KZ that guy? Is Precious that guy?
Right.
Spoelstra doesn't seem to hesitate, incorporating the young players. I mean, we saw how Tyler Hero was on the floor, in clutch moments throughout the season last season. So Spoelstra doesn't seem to have that same kind of hesitation when incorporating young guys that Riley used to have back in the day, where, the rookies never stepped foot on the floor for a second.
And what about, we just came off a final appearance. What if Spo wants to save our vets? You know what I mean? Then he'll definitely throw out the young guys first, and those guys will definitely have the opportunity to come in. So if he wants to save Bam for a little bit, even though Bam's signed that max and he's not going to want to sit down, and if he wants to sit down Jimmy and Goran, these young guys are going to have the opportunity to come in and really flourish if Spo wants to save these guys for later in the season.
For sure.
I think that we need to kind of like pump our brakes in terms of our expectations of the young guys. I think the recency bias that the Heat fans may have because of having someone like Kendrick Nunn and Duncan Robinson who come out of nowhere, those two are the equivalent of getting the production of 2 first-round picks. And both of them were undrafted guys that we just stole out of the garbage can. And so we have to be careful of the expectations that we place on people like like Precious, like KZ, who may still be developing, and not think of them like they're going to come in and be major contributors like the other two names that we mentioned before.
Yeah, again, that's part of the exciting part of this season, right? I mean, they've got so many youngsters, and we've seen so much from them in the guys who've been around for a minute, and now we have these expectations for the new guys. It'll be interesting to see where Spoelstra goes. I think this is a good sort of bridge to what we wanted to talk about next, which is what we think the starting lineup might look like, right? Because last year we were surprised when Kendrick Nunn was in there at the beginning, and for a long time, Spoelstra had Myers Leonard starting at the 5, and Bam at the 4, right? So I think the most common starting lineup last year was Nunn, Butler, Robinson, Bam, and Myers Leonard. So thinking about everybody who's on the team right now, I mean, we're not talking about a Harden deal or any other deals for any of the other players who've been talked about, right? So based on what the roster looks like today, what do you guys think the starting lineup for maybe most of the season? I mean, beyond just opening night, what the lineup will look like for most of the season? I guess, Royal, if you want to jump in on that, since I don't know how much time you got.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in, and then after that, I'm going to jump out. So my original thoughts were to keep it kind of similar to what it was last year and have Avery Bradley start in place of Kendrick Nunn with the same lineup. So Avery Bradley, Duncan, Bam, Jimmy, and Myers at the 5. The more I've watched in the preseason, it looks like we're going to move forward with the Bam at the 5 lineup. And so I'm anticipating that the lineup inserts Hero into the starting lineup, which I was originally against to. But I think he's shown enough in his development that he can, man that point guard spot well enough so that he can grow in it. So I think we start Hero, Duncan, Bam, Jimmy, and we start Bam. I missed somebody. Oh, Mo Harkless. Yeah, Mo Harkless will be like. So I think we start in that lineup. And I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of the lineup because I think Tyler could help the bench unit out more so than Kendrick Nunn will be able to. But I just see them, moving him forward in that level of progression. But so I'm out of here, guys. You guys have a great rest of the show.
Yep. Thanks for joining us.
Take it easy, brother.
See you, bro.
All right. So he said Tyler, Duncan, Jimmy, Mo Harkless, and Bam, right?
Yeah. And we're talking about like predicting what we think is going to happen, right? Not what we think should.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what they're going to roll out there. But if we're looking at most of the season, I would say if he doesn't start by the beginning of the season, I will say by, I don't know, about a month and a half into the season, KZ will have overtaken that role from Mo. right? And at that point, he would end up playing most of the season. So I think at the start, they're going to put Mo because of the familiarity with the NBA, just kind of that veteran presence. But eventually, I think KZ's going to outplay him for that spot. And so it would be the same. Just swap those two. So it'd be Tyler, Duncan, Jimmy, Bam, and KZ.
And is that the lineup that you would like to see? Or
I think, yeah, that's the lineup I think I would like to see at the start. I think that gives us a decent option for bench players too, right? Because off the bench, Goran is your guy there, right? Yeah. Like Goran should really be handling most of that offense. So I think that's the one that I want to see out there. But I do think they're going to put Mo Harkless at the beginning of the season just because of that. Hey, he's been in the league a little bit. Let's see if maybe it was just preseason or whatever it was.
For sure. Yeah, Jonathan, what do you think?
I don't see Miami paying $10 million to Myers Leonard if we're not going to at least play him. And I don't really see him having a role off the bench that much. You know what I mean? He's not somebody that'll come in and he can fit with everybody. He's kind of somebody where you got to systematically play around him. So I think he'll fit better with Bam. And you'll want to save Bam for the playoffs. That's when you want to have him bang with those big bodies. You don't want to have him. He's a smaller size center, so you don't want to have him banging with these big centers like Embiid or any of these guys. So I think starting Myers and then Bam, having Jimmy, Duncan, and Nunn. I think we're going to run back that same one as last season. The only thing we might tweak is trade Nunn out for Hero, whoever we want to showcase more, depending if we do want to make a trade. Obviously, that's something we want to do too. And if we want Nunn to keep his value, having him play 20 minutes and sit in the end of the second half and the end of the sit at the end of the second half and then play somebody else in his spot, have him start off the game and just get you those quick points where teams can't really scheme around as well. That'll be his more impactful way of coming in, because we've seen when he comes off the bench, how many times have we seen him have a good game versus when he starts, he plays so much better. So I think we run that same starting group next year, the same one, and as far as the regular season goes, I think they might ease Goran a little bit more, but I think Hero's going to get the significant chunk of minutes off the bench. But I think they're going to ease Goran in. And as far as that, I think the bench is just going to be really, really good next year. Even I think it could be better than we had last year as far as the bench depth goes.
Yeah, I think this bench definitely has the potential to really take it to the second units on some of those other teams. Mm-hmm. I mean, listen, for me, I think Tyler Hero has probably earned a starting spot at this point. I mean, there's only so much you could expect from him to do in limited minutes off the bench. Not that his minutes were really limited at all for the most part, but I think he's probably somebody that I would imagine joins the starting group along with Duncan and Jimmy, obviously. But then the big question is, does Spoelstra go with Myers Leonard, as you said? I mean, you made a great argument, right? You're paying him the money. He seemed to have, a pretty comfortable role prior to his injury as sort of the first quarter guy and third quarter guy. Right. We didn't really see him, in the closing lineups at all. So it'll be interesting to see if Spoelstra decides to run that back and bring Myers into that starting group, or if he decides to go with somebody like KZ or Mo Harkless. I mean, for me, my lineup, I think Michael and I share that lineup. I want to see Tyler and Duncan and Jimmy and KZ and Bam. Yep. I mean, I really want to see what that five can do. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, obviously we'll see what Spoelstra decides to do.
And I think on that, eventually, right, if everybody's talking about a trade, these are so many pieces that might be included in it.
Yeah.
And I think if you have them in the starting lineup and you throw them out there from the start, we as Heat fans are going to get a really good idea of what we have, right? Because the big debate was the potential future that we could have versus what we can for sure have, right? And not picking either side there, but seeing what we have is going to go a long way for knowing the value. You know what I mean? And so I just think it helps out a lot more. And I would be surprised if Nunn is really here for the whole season. Honestly, I just don't see where he fits back in, because if you start him, you have no defense, no passing. I don't think he's going to be here that long.
Yeah, it's interesting to see. I mean, because he was so good for so long last season, and then he hit that rookie wall, it feels like, and then just I know he had the bout with COVID prior to the bubble and some personal issues on top of that. None of that stuff was ever really developed or publicized at all, so I want him to succeed. I know everybody wants him to succeed. I mean, he's a Miami Heat player. for me, I feel like if they can hang on to him and develop him, he could almost be the next, sixth man type microwave off the bench. Goran played that role early in the year last year. Right. I feel like Nunn has that kind of potential. So we're talking a lot about starting lineups, and a lot of times the guys who open the game aren't necessarily the guys who close the game. So are there any differences to what you guys want to see close out a close ball game? Closing lineup?
I think you're gonna have to you're probably gonna sacrifice a little bit of defense, but you'll throw Jimmy on the hardest defender and Bam on the second biggest guy. So I think for the closing lineup, you'll probably want to see Tyler and Goran, because those are two guys that can not only catch and shoot, but they can create their own offense. Yeah. And then on top of that, you'll have Jimmy, Bam, and that fourth person. I mean, they don't really close Duncan because of his defense. We always kind of have that guy who's a defender. So I think KZ, if he continues to progress throughout the season, if he can hit threes at least a 36% clip, I think KZ is going to be the guy that they close the lineup with, because he's the guy that you can match up on the longest guy, on the other team, whether it's, he doesn't have the muscular frame for LeBron or something, but obviously, you have Kawhi where he can give him problems. And if anything, you throw, Jimmy on Kawhi and you throw him on PG. And they can work around it that way, where you have three really good defenders, two really good creators, and then you have Jimmy and Bam who can just make things happen. So I think that's our best closing lineup for the season if KZ pans out like he should.
Okay, Michael, what do you think? Is your closing lineup any different?
It's similar. I think you're going to have to consider throwing in Avery Bradley into the mix, right? I think if you have Avery Bradley in there, it opens the door for Duncan to be that fifth guy. Right? Because then you've got three solid defensive players out there. One guy we haven't even mentioned tonight that I saw in the comments, and I admittedly, it's not that I forgot he was on the Heat. It's just, it's easy. Iguodala, right? Yeah. I'm not saying he's going to close out all too often, but again, when it's a really tight game, they talked about, I think it was Greg that brought it up, like Greg Sylvander, that like all defensive team, right? For last season. And it was something like, what was it? Jay, Bam, Jimmy, Iggy, and then maybe like a DJJ or something, just something that's just throwing out the kitchen sink for defense. Yeah. You could be looking at something similar in some of these games, right? Where you've got Avery, Iggy, maybe Hero, right? And then you've got Jimmy and Bam. And that team defensively is going to be really strong. I mean, you're looking at one weak point in Tyler, and you can still make decent offense happen, especially if Bradley picks up his shooting. So it's hard for me to pick one lineup, but I think similar to what Jonathan's saying is probably what's going to end up happening. Just maybe swap out Avery Bradley for Goran, depending on what's going on.
Yeah, I think you guys are right. I mean, it's probably going to be matchup dependent, right? And who are we facing? And I think that's one of the positives to this roster, the versatility that Spoelstra has at his disposal. I mean, there are legitimately 11 or 12 guys that we can put out on a nightly basis, feeling that, these are NBA players and you're not sort of losing anything by having them on the floor. I think, Goran and Tyler are probably, on the floor most nights at the end of the game, Jimmy and Bam, obviously. And then that fifth spot, I do think it's going to rotate depending on the matchup, right? So is it Avery Bradley if there's, a quick guard on the other end? Is it Iguodala? Is it somebody like, I don't know, Kelly Olynyk maybe, or Precious if he's really made a jump, stuff like that. Right. So, I think that's, again, one of the interesting things that we're going to see early on. Now, one of the things that we were talking about after the first preseason game was the idea of interior defense. And I saw in one of the comments that was put up that, the Heat need somebody bigger, they need to be bigger and faster down low. Right. And interior defense, tended to be an issue when the team went small last season. And we saw that it was kind of a problem against the Pelicans in that first preseason game. And when you look at the slate of games that the Heat have to open the season, the first 10 games, they've got Milwaukee twice, they've got Boston twice, they've got Dallas, they've got New Orleans, they've got Orlando. They've got some teams with some big guys, right? Guys who can attack the basket, guys that are good on the inside. When you look at the roster as it is right now, I guess kind of leading you guys there. But what's the glaring weakness here? Where's the big problem in your mind? Is it that interior defense or is it something else?
I think for me it's rebounding. It's that interior presence, right? I think Bam is great, and I think Bam does have a really good interior presence. But then when you get outside of Bam, I don't think we have it, right? Like Kelly doesn't give you much in terms of size and power inside. Myers, for as much as I do like the guy and think that there are things he could do for us, hasn't shown us really the ability to rebound strong and play hard inside, right? So then you're really left with Precious. Precious is slightly smaller than Bam. Again, we haven't seen it in a regular season game where he's that big interior presence. Sure, he had a great rebounding performance against the Raptors, but that was one game. And it's like Royal was saying, we can't just expect these guys to solve all of our problems. As much as I want KZ to start and think he can be good, it's not like I'm sitting here thinking he fixes everything, we're fine. So I think that interior presence does need a little bit of a help for the Heat. And so I'm interested to see where that comes from this season, but I think that's why they have all these guys to see who's going to step up and take it.
Yeah. Jonathan, what do you think?
Yeah, I have to agree, because if we look at everything else, we have our 3-point shooting, we have our perimeter defender now that we have Avery Bradley. We have everything inside with Jimmy and Bam, and we have the only thing we're really missing, like you said, is that interior defense. That true big. That's why I really like the Aaron Baines. I was really hoping we'd get somebody like him, somebody that can just bang at the center with these big guys, because Bam, like Michael said, he tries, but sometimes 38 minutes of banging against a big guy, or like Anthony Davis, you can't do that. You know what I mean? Because then you're gonna, like you say, he gets injured. It was unfortunate, but it was because he was doing so much for the team and banging with the bigs all the time. So I think really just getting that true big. I would even like to see DeMarcus Cousins come in, because he could have been the guy. He's not the best pick and roll defense, but he's a guy that you could put at the center position and let him bang. So that interior defense really, I feel like, is the main hole on the team. But maybe Precious can step up. Maybe Bam will be that guy. Maybe Myers is going to step up this year too, because he was a little bit hurt. And, maybe that now that we have somebody else that can cover the point of attack defense, he won't be put in such hard positions anymore. Because a lot of the time, because of the coverage we played, he would be the guy that would have to be caught in the middle of the guard that was penetrating and then the big. And then it always...
And he started for a reason. Right? Like we can't look back on the Myers Leonard signing and be like, oh, that was a huge waste of money. He was starting for us for a while. There was a reason for it, and there was a reason why Nunn was starting too, right? Like, sure, in the playoffs they didn't play the way we wanted to, but maybe they can play differently this season. It's a new season. We got to at least see what they have before we sit here and say, oh, that signing was a complete waste. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree. And then go ahead.
No, sorry. I mean, when you think about it, Myers, and you guys kind of touched on it. It's helping Bam not have to deal with, the Joel Embiids of the world for 48 minutes or whatever the case may be. So he was able to buy 10, 15 minutes at a time that allowed Bam to rest. And, on the offensive end, Myers, stretches the floor for them, right? So he opens up some things that, Precious doesn't necessarily do, which is part of the reason why we like watching Bam and Kelly so often on the offensive end. Now, Kelly is obviously not the defensive presence that we kind of wish that he was, right? So I think there's some value there. And again, they did this stuff on purpose. As you said, he started for the bulk of the season, and then they brought him back for a reason. So I don't think he's just going to languish there on the end of the bench. And he's such a great communicator. He is a defensive presence, but as you were saying, he was drawn out in a lot of those pick and roll coverages. And maybe the addition of Avery Bradley and the development of some of these other young defenders will help sort of mitigate some of those issues.
Right.
Jonathan, were you going to say something else on that, or?
Yeah, and like I was saying, you were saying, he stretches the floor really well too, and I think he shot almost 40% from deep last year. And if you looked at his shot for the first couple of games, he was more willing to shoot that shot, and that was something that we didn't really see last year. He was always so hesitating to shoot that shot. So if we can get an aggressive Myers where he shoots 6 to 8 and he's shooting 40%, that's going to be a very, very effective Myers and one that we can really, really use coming into next season as a body to bang next to Bam.
Yeah, the podcast we're always talking about it. Just shoot up, throw up 5 threes a game, right? If you've got the minutes, if he's playing the minutes, right? If he's playing limited minutes and he's throwing up 5 threes a game, then hey, you're shooting a little bit too much. But if he's playing similar minutes to what he did last year, just shoot him up, right? Like last year, at some point, he seemed really hesitant. Just throw it up. If you miss, right? Like it can happen. Just throw it up there. You have a decent clip. Let it out.
And on top of that, he's drawing the center out. So if you shoot that long shot, there's a chance that long rebound can go back to the Heat.
It's like Bam's mid-range jumper, right? Like every once in a while, just take it, force them to step up on you.
Absolutely. He did start it in the preseason.
Mm-hmm.
He started
that was
those
nice.
mid-rangers. It was very welcoming to see.
If he develops that part of his game, I mean, forget it.
Over.
Yeah,
over.
Forget it.
I've always talked about it. I think he can be kind of a Kevin Garnett kind of clone where he's so good offensively. And he was carrying those Minnesota teams back in the day when Minnesota had absolutely nothing next to him. So if Bam can do that in a winning offense, and then on top of that, now we're giving Spo a second year with this same group and just more tools. Like I almost feel like it's unfair because other teams have to claw out a starting lineup, and then we're like, who do we want to start? Who do we want to come off the bench? Who's going to work better off the bench? So we're giving Spo so much flexibility. There's so much tool. It's like so it's almost unfair to some other teams that just don't have the depth out of 2 players on the top.
Absolutely. And this year, probably more than any other year, they're going to need that depth. I mean, the league has shrunk the season a little bit. Instead of the traditional 82 games, they're going to do 72 games this year. And a lot of, what we would normally see sort of spread out over, the length of the season, these games are getting condensed, right? So in the first 10 games, the Heat, they start on Wednesday in Orlando. They start tomorrow in Orlando. Michael's going to be there, right?
So nice.
So
those tickets are expensive.
They weren't that bad. I didn't think.
Oh yeah, I think I hit the retail. They're only selling them in groups of 4, aren't they?
Oh, I bought it through StubHub. I bought it through secondary market.
Ticketmaster is only selling groups of 4.
Actually, I bought them through SeatGeek. So SeatGeek, if you're looking to sponsor something, this show's pretty good.
There we go. Shameless plug, like it. They start in Orlando on Wednesday. Then they've got the Pelicans on Christmas here in Miami, and then they've got 2 games back to back in Miami against the Bucks on the 29th and the 30th. And then they get a day off, and they're going to Dallas to play Luka and the Mavericks. And then they get maybe the easiest game of this early slate against the rebuilding Oklahoma City Thunder. And then 2 of their next 3 are against the Celtics. The Wizards are kind of squeezed in there. And then the last of the first 10 games, mid-January, we're talking about a couple tilts there with the Philadelphia 76ers. This is a gauntlet.
Yeah, that's a rough schedule.
Yeah. I mean, of those first 11 games through that Sixers game that you see there on January the 14th, we're talking about, I think every single one of those teams except for Washington, right, was a playoff team.
And Washington's definitely going to be a playoff team this year.
Oklahoma City technically was, but
right. But so right,
like just swap them, right? Like Washington wasn't, but probably could and should be this year.
Yeah,
and then Oklahoma City.
Yeah, so we're going to know quite a bit about the Heat, assuming, that there are no crazy hiccups with COVID or anything like that. We're going to know quite a bit about this team and about Spoelstra's approach come mid-January, right? So these
against the Bucks and Celtics too, which is there's three teams, right? Kind of like in our way in the Eastern Conference, and it's the Nets, the Bucks, and the Celtics, and you're playing 2 of those 3 right off the bat. So let's just see what we got.
Yeah. And listen, the 76ers are getting lumped in right there with everybody else. I mean, the only team that we're not seeing here early on, I mean, besides the Nets, is the Raptors, right? But then everybody else, we're talking about the top of the East going at it here to start the year. So, it's a gauntlet to start the season for the Heat. Everybody, there haven't been any injuries coming out of preseason, which is obviously a good thing. Goran looked pretty good coming off his injury. Yeah. We didn't see Butler, but that was probably just like a maintenance issue, right? Just kind of getting him some rest.
The dude was gassed a couple months back.
Yeah, absolutely. So, 72 games this year. All right. ESPN forecasted the Heat to get to 44 wins. NBA.com got them to 46 wins. 538 was the lowest on them at 40 wins. Caesars out in Vegas set the over-under for the Heat at 44.5 wins. Where do you guys see the Heat ending up in terms of the win total this year?
Jonathan?
I think we can get to 50 wins. You know what I mean? I really do think that this is a team. 50-22 isn't that, wild of a dream for this team because we have such a deep squad. And even if we have, the outbreak with the virus or anything like that, other teams are going to have that issue as well. So we got to realize that we're not going to be the only ones that have it. It's going to happen to a lot of teams. And with teams that don't have depth, that's going to be the ones that suffer the most. So if you're looking at, the Lakers, if Braun gets it and it's just AD, it's going to be hard. For the Clippers, if Kawhi or Paul George get it, it's going to be hard. For Houston, if James Harden gets it, that team's nothing anymore, So, but if you look at Miami, how do we play without Jimmy Butler? We play just as seamless without Jimmy Butler as we do as with him. You know what I mean? And, Bam might be probably the most important player. When we talked about like the big three era, we'd say that Bosh was the most important player because he was the hardest one to replace. I think right now Bam is our most important player. So obviously if we lose him, it'll be the hardest to lose. But I think with the depth that we have, I think Coach Spo is probably going to get Coach of the Year. And I think just the level of talent that we have on this team is just going to really bring this team up. And I think we're going to probably become 2 or 3 seed right there with the Milwaukee Bucks and Brooklyn Nets.
Okay, so 50 wins, 2 or 3 seed. Obviously, I really hope that happens for sure. Michael, what do you think? Win total?
I would love to say 72. And honestly, I see your points on the 50 wins. I'm probably going to be closer to that 44, 45 win season. And I think my biggest thing is this. I think this season more than any other is shaped up like a really long stretch of short playoffs, right? You got back-to-backs against Milwaukee, back-to-backs against the Sixers, the Nets, the Celtics. So everything is going to be like a series because you don't have this giant adjustment period, right? It isn't like you play the Bucks today and then the next time you play them is in a month when you can throw out some different stuff that they haven't seen on tape in the last few. They just saw you yesterday, right? They just got defeated by you. If you won that game, they're hungry. They know what your tendencies are. It's going to be really tough to get a winning streak together, right? There isn't that lull in the middle of the schedule either. So I'm going to put us at around 44, 45. That's a really tough way to go. And then you've got, I don't know, maybe I think 3 seed is probably the ceiling for us just because I think the Bucks are a fantastic regular season team. That's just the way they play. They're great at that. Then you have the Nets, who I think are probably going to take the 2 or battle it out with the Bucks for the 1, right? They're going to be right there with them. And then you've got the Celtics, who probably can stick around there as well. So I'm going to give the Heat actually the 4 seed. Just think that's the way it's going to work out. And it's just a matter of the way the Heat plays, right? Like when it's a playoff series, they're all in all the time. The regular season, we have our ups and downs. So I'm going to put us in the 4 seed, about 44 wins.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm thinking 3 or 4 seed myself, and I would probably take the over at Caesars. I would go over 44.5. I would say probably 45 wins. I am curious to see, what Spoelstra does with those matchups, as you mentioned. I mean, you're playing the Bucks 2 nights in a row. Are you resting guys? Are you not showing stuff? Things like that. I'm curious to see how all of that kind of develops. But for me, I think between the discipline that this team has, the cohesive nature of this unit, I think a lot of that is going to go a long way to getting wins on those second nights of back-to-backs and things like that. And the reality is this roster is still pretty young. I mean, they've got some veterans that have been around for a long time. I know Jimmy's got a lot of tread on those tires, but, Hero was a rookie last year. Nunn was a rookie last year. Robinson, this is what is going to be his 3rd year in the league. KZ, Precious. I mean, these are all guys that can eat up some minutes, not to mention, some of the two-way guys, Gabe Vincent, Max Strus, who, we haven't talked about those guys. They might play a role this season as well. So we're going to wrap it up here. The thing that we didn't touch on at all today was James Harden. So let's end it. Let's end it with a little Harden talk. Just quickly, 2 minutes or less. Are you glad that it didn't happen? Do you wish that it would have happened? Do you think it will happen? What do you think?
Yeah, I wish it happened. You know what I mean? And I do think that it still will happen because if you look at Harden's attitude with the press about questions about a team, it's not getting any better. You know what I mean? So even if that team does good things, I feel like he knows that there's no chance or there's no path for the Rockets to win the finals there. And I don't think he sees a path for himself to win the finals there. I do think this team with the plethora of young players can hold on to a piece or two. And I think that's what's holding this deal up is that Miami wants to keep a piece or two, i.e. a Duncan Robinson or maybe one of Precious or KZ now that we've seen what we've seen out of them. So I do think that it will happen. I think that Pat will pull it out. We're going to probably, if it happens, I do think that it's because Harden has shown like, hey, I don't want to be in Houston. I'll do my Anthony Davis impression where I'll play the 24 minutes on my contract, and after that I won't play a minute more. And I think he'll eventually, maybe it doesn't happen to us. I do think the trade does happen where he gets out of Houston, but I'm hoping it is to us, obviously.
Okay, Michael, what do you think? Are you glad that it didn't happen? Do you wish it would have? Do you think?
Man, I had just switched sides too. Like, regardless of PJ Tucker, I was watching I think it was the taco show last Saturday night, and my big worry was that gap after him and Jimmy are gone, right? And you kind of waste, in my opinion, if you've given up so much future, some of Bam's best years. But Bam is a great recruiter, so I hadn't really thought of it that way. And I was like, we could definitely get guys at that point. So I had just jumped on the bandwagon. So I have mixed feelings about it. I think for now, I'm just kind of indifferent, right? Like, I'm not glad it didn't happen, and I'm not upset it didn't happen either. I believe in this team. If Pat says you're asking too much, I need that, or this team is fine the way it is right now, I'm good with it. So I guess I'm leaning towards happy, but just indifferent. If we get him, great. If not, we still got a good team. So
yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. I mean, I want to see where this team goes. I think this team has a great deal of potential. As Royal said earlier, Eastern Conference Finals at the very least, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would have loved to add somebody like James Harden, talking about a top 5 NBA player, somebody who I personally don't love watching his style of basketball, but would it be different here with this group? And then I guess the sticking point for me was always, would they be able to hang on to somebody like Duncan Robinson or one of the other guys? So, I kind of right there with you, kind of thinking through it and kind of, wanting it to happen at times, not wanting it to happen. I guess at this point, if it's going to happen, it'll happen. The one thing that we do know is Riley is always in on guys like this. He has a long track record. I actually wrote an article today.
Definitely plug that. That was a good one.
Yeah, it was the article is called 5 Most Important Trade Days in Heat History, and I kind of walked through all of the disgruntled stars that they got their hands on. And so there's a long history with this franchise making these kinds of moves for guys like James Harden. So, if you want to read up about what the Heat have done in the past, obviously go to the website, 5reasonsports.com. You could check it out. Thanks, guys, for joining me today. We've got an exciting season on tap. The Heat are getting going tomorrow against the Orlando Magic, looking to get that first win of the season. And, when the time's right, we will be doing our pregame shows, our postgame shows. We will continue to be sponsored by Biscayne Bay Brew, and they will be sending us beers, hopefully, so we can enjoy those brews while we were talking about the Heat and going through this season. So thanks for joining me. Thanks for everybody for watching. Enjoy the games.